I know in Jurassic Park it always caught my eye how raptors were different. More difficult to contain, more difficult to control. And how much of a pain in the ass it must have been for those running the park to have contingencies for these dinosaurs specifically. And then I look at the owl and surprise, surprise. The same thing seems to be true. Raptors have always been a pain in the ass. And every time I see how raptors are handled in the owl, I can't help but laugh a little because history does seem to be repeating itself. So it makes you wonder, what is it that makes that so? And why does Dondi, the man behind the owl, seem to fear this playable? Is it because of a very dedicated community that prefers to specialize on this playable for maximum skill expression? Is it because of its ability to latch onto prey or pin them down? Is it simply too good itself? Or is it something else entirely? Personally, I've been there since the Legacy days, and I have always played Raptor. So this part of the story I know very well, because I was there. So to start, I think we have to go back a little, to really explain why raptors are a pain. A few years ago, I was just gaming for fun. I wasn't even making videos yet. And I stumbled upon the owl. As a raptor enthusiast, I started watching Sticky Utah. At the time, he was the best raptor player you could find. Many of us, including myself, we drew our inspiration from him. We'd follow his clips, try to replicate his kills, and study his explanation of how the hitbox functions. Then, one day while observing a player fighting a Rex on his own, I saw something strange. Something we didn't think was possible. He was inside of the Rex's hitbox, but he stayed alive. Was this an anomaly? Or had we just discovered something? The player eventually died about 15 seconds later, but my friends and we had already seen it. We were already whispering to each other, trying to process what we had just witnessed. A blind spot? We asked ourselves. And then we tried. After a few attempts, we learned something about the hitbox. Something that could be weaponized. Suddenly, the raptor could go from a pack hunter to a solo killer with an extremely high success rate. We, the first ones to explore this, started creating new rides that Sticky Utah had never even tried. We slashed the time to kill from a solid 20 minutes down to a staggering 2 minutes. We knew we had discovered a new style, and very quickly we started to apply the same hitbox logic across multiple species. Some, like the Stegosaurus, remained immune, but our discovery was enough to catapult us into the next era. Back in Legacy, raptors weren't feared because they were overpowered, because you could kill them in one hit. They were feared because players learned how to bend the game itself. We call it the riding era. Raptors had an insane turn control and acceleration. Once you understood the blind spots in the dinosaur's hitbox, you could cling to them like glue, circling their flanks faster than their animations could track. It started as improvisation, but then came left riding, a perfected technique where you'd stick to the target's left side, staying invisible to their hit range, you were just out of reach. And I was amongst the first to actually pull it off. Discovery that turned into a full-blown movement among skilled raptor mains. Suddenly, apex predators that used to dominate found themselves powerless against a pack of Utahs that seemed to defy physics. What followed was chaos, an age where raptors became more than just playable. They became a martial art. And from that moment on, developers realized something important. Raptors were not just another dinosaur to balance. They were a force that exposed the limits of the game itself. Raptors have always stood out because they kind of break the usual flow of combat. They're fast, they're smart, and they punish mistakes in ways other dinosaurs simply can't. So a skilled pack of raptors can turn a solo hunt into chaos, circling, leaping, and coordinating attacks faster than the game can ever catch up with. Even solo raptors, when mastered, can exploit movement and hitbox quirks to outplay predators much larger than themselves. It's not raw damage that makes them scary. It's the combination of speed, coordination, and unpredictability. Every time the devs try to tone them down, they're reminded this isn't about the stats. Raptor players will test the limits of the game itself, and players who master them are almost untouchable. Raptor mains are a breed apart and very vocal. I mean, look at me. They thrive on mobility, coordination, and mastery, the polar opposite of the tanky sit-and-heal style of most large dinosaurs. And because of that, they've developed a skill culture. Small, tight-knit groups that train together. They're often viewed as sweats or toxic by casual players. Solo players hate fighting them. Group hunters respect or despise them, depending on how well they play. As a result, a divided community perception, feared, respected, and resented all at once. From what I've gathered, Dondi has long treated raptors as a design paradox, and that's his words, not mine. He said multiple times that raptors are hard to balance because they rely too much on team coordination and animation precision. Raptors often expose flaws in the owl's hit detection, animation syncing, and server latency. He's also admitted that raptor players push the game systems to their limits, making them a QA nightmare. There's an ongoing developer fear of releasing them in a state where they'll be dominating PvP. So while Dondi clearly does like the idea of raptors, trust me, he loves them, he also fears their effect on game balance and player psychology. Because in Legacy, combat was simple but brutal. Get behind someone, and if you were skilled enough, they'd lose hours of progress to something they could not stop. It was direct, punishing, and left a lasting mark on their psyche, the fear of being ambushed by a raptor. In EVRIMA, it got more subtle. We started feinting attacks, tricking opponents into animations that temporarily trapped them. It turned combat into a mental chess game. Am I actually being hit, or is this a feint? The raptor forces you to test your patience, your reflexes, and your decision making under pressure. In both cases, raptors aren't just strong. They manipulate how you think and react, creating tension, doubt, and sometimes pure frustration. In pure combat mode, raptors aren't overpowered. Their damage and durability are modest at best. What makes them scary is the human factor. A skilled pack can erase larger players in no time. Poorly synced animations can sometimes make them feel unhittable. Their mobility breaks traditional 1v1 balance, which the owl often prioritizes. So raptors end up constantly toned down to protect casual playability, but this also frustrates their dedicated mains, who see it as punishing skill. And here's the poetic part. Just like in Jurassic Park, raptors in the Isle symbolize control versus chaos. They represent the unpredictable, emergent side of the game, players pushing systems beyond intended limits. Dondi, just like Hammond, wants an island that functions, a world that feels believable and balanced. But raptors? They embody the wild intelligence and adaptability that threatens that control. So the fear isn't of the playable itself, it's of what it represents. Player mastery, coordination, and chaos. The one thing you can't code away. So that brings us to EVRIMA, our current day. We've seen nerf after nerf while new mechanics keep getting added. A clear sign that Dondi loves raptors, but also doesn't want them to get too much going for them. So in the end, what makes a raptor scary and how can you stop it? The answer is kind of simple. You can't. A raptor's strength isn't just in its stats. It's in the skill, patience, and experience. You cannot take away someone's mastery of the game without breaking the experience for the rest of the player base. Nerfing skill punishes the players who have earned it. And the side effect is that it actually hurts casual playability. The very thing the nerfs were supposed to protect, new players, without all those hours of practice, end up frustrated and feeling powerless. And while this is exactly what makes balancing Raptor so difficult, casual accessibility should always remain the guiding principle, since that was the original reason behind nerfs in the first place. A little food for thought. Raptors are scary because they reward dedication, intelligence, and timing. Not because they're inherently overpowered. And that's why, no matter the nerfs or new mechanics, the fear will never truly go away. A problem with the Elder system that I see is artificial power gaps. The Frail Elder, the stats are way weaker, it becomes unplayable, frustrating, and players in this stage are kind of punished for no skill related reason, creating a negative experience that kind of discourages engagement. And then the Prime Elder, the stats are significantly stronger, it becomes the default meta, players are now forced to chase the optimal version just to remain competitive. This creates unnecessary power inflation and it makes the game feel like a checklist rather than a skill-based ecosystem. Essentially, the system creates artificial power ceilings rather than letting skill and survival naturally define who excels. Then we have the second problem, checklist fatigue. Requiring players to go to specific areas or perform specific actions to unlock Prime Elder turns progression into a forced grind. Instead of emergent gameplay, hunting, avoiding predators, forming strategies, players are now directed along a path. It reduces freedom and makes the world feel less alive because your power depends on following a checklist rather than mastering the ecosystem. Another issue is that you can never really get in sync with your friends either. If they have started growing and they become frail elders, they have to entomb. And yeah, you just never get to play with them. Because it's just certain dinosaurs don't have really good primes, Then we have the meta. Once Prime Elder stats define the meta, everyone is incentivized to chase the same build, reducing diversity in playstyles. And skill diffs kind of diminish because of the dominant factor being a stat stage, not timing, coordination, or clever gameplay. There's also a bit of a loss of natural emergence. By tying progression to arbitrary conditions, the game loses its organic emergent gameplay. Life, survival, and growth in nature aren't about checkpoints. They're about resource availability, diet, and environmental conditions. Players should feel like their character's condition is in a dynamic reflection of its life, not a pre-programmed ladder. So why nutrition-based progression just works better? A nutrition system ties growth and strength directly to gameplay and environmental mastery. If your diet is poor or inconsistent, your creature suffers. If your diet is rich and appropriate, your creature thrives. This mirrors real-life survival and adds meaningful consequences to decisions. It naturally creates variation in stats, encourages exploration, hunting, and adaptation, and keeps the player's journey unique and emergent. Unlike a fixed checklist, nutrient-based progression rewards skill, adaptability, and observation rather than rote completion. So what does that have to do with Raptor, you might ask? Like, where did that come from? Well, let's finally talk about why raptors get the short end of the stick more than any other species. For example, the frail elder raptor drops to a speed of 32 kilometers an hour, down from their original 46.8. That is not just a nerf. It makes them unplayable. And then the prime elder has a speed that ends up at 38, but that's still far below their baseline. Compare that to other fast dinosaurs like Dilophosaurus, who barely loses speed or even becomes faster. Raptors, a species defined by mobility, are effectively being crippled and penalized for surviving. The system compounds this with the checklist gating the prime elder. You're forced to complete specific tasks in specific locations, turning growth into rote completion rather than emergent gameplay. Raptors, whose identity is built around adaptability, coordination, and precise timing, is just uniquely harmed by this. Then comes the entomb option at the end of the life. It's meant to be a meaningful choice for most species. It's just one of the multiple viable paths. But for raptors, there's only one logical choice. You have to entomb. Any alternative leaves you with stats so low that you're slower than your prey and slower than your predator, and effectively unqualified to survive. What was supposed to be optional became mandatory. A better system would tie elder progression to nutrient values, diet, and survival choices, keeping growth unpredictable, emergent, and skill rewarding. Raptors could retain the speed, freedom, and player expression that makes them thrilling, rather than being forced into an artificial meta or punished for surviving too long. This isn't about claiming raptors need a buff, or they're too weak. It's about asking for fairness in progression. Every species should feel empowered to thrive, not forced into a binary choice where the only option is to entomb or become ineffective. I guess all that to just ask one simple question. Was this tree supposed to be a 4? Or does Dondi Fear Raptors?